Today has been the first day of what is going to be our new schedule for the fall. My daughter starts school later this week, and she is currently downstairs cleaning her room. I thought this would be a good opportunity for me to snatch a few minutes of filming time. There was a project I did over the summer that's only kind of related to books. Well, actually, it's like all about books, but it's also interior decorating. Like most fantasy authors or bookish people in general, I always wanted to have a really neat home library. And pardon if you hear any hissing in the background. We brought in a very pitiful looking stray kitten, and I think she's going to be a permanent part of the family, and our older cat is not very happy about that this week. It's not too bad. They're getting used to each other. Noodle has been the only cat for her entire 13-year life. And Yuki, the kitten, is totally smitten with her and wants to be her best friend and her playmate, and Noodle is having none of it. So right now I am in my library space. When we moved into this house, I was really excited about the loft that we had upstairs. The sellers left bookshelves up here. There are 8 large bookshelves. The loft is about 20 feet long and maybe like 8 feet wide, so it's a pretty interesting space, but it's really limited in how it can be used because it's open on this side over here. You can see like down into the living room over there, and then we have like a sloped ceiling on that side, and there are doorways at both ends. So it was kind of a difficult space to do anything with, and I really wanted to be able to make it into like a cozy reading spot. And I have filmed a couple things up here so far, but I haven't really taken time to show anybody the space aside from a couple little reels that I put together on Instagram. So for sake of a book lover's heart, let me show you my library space and what I did to make it this way. We unfortunately kind of live on a tight budget. I am a stay-at-home mom. My books and my doll projects are my only source of income. I do everything that I can to make sure that I pay for all of my expensive hobbies on my own, and I also pay for all of my publishing expenses out of the money that I make from my books. And since I write fantasy and they tend to be long, my publishing expenses can be a little up there sometimes. So for my library makeover, I set a budget of $200, and that needed to cover everything. So like new furniture, any decorations. It had kind of been a catch-all space in our house rather than a library. The shelves were a really convenient place to just stick everything that we didn't know what to do with when we first moved in. So when I started, it was kind of a total mess. And no matter what I did, it stayed messy because we had never taken the time to sort anything out. We had never taken the time to find homes for all the stuff that had kind of collected up there. My daughter uses it as a crafting space too, and she does paper crafts, and her paper bits end up all over the floor instead of ever making it into her trash can. And it was also important that I only really used half of the loft for my stuff because she has a small tent that her grandparents gave her that she likes to use for her reading tent, and she brings books up here and it's full of like plushies and pillows and blankets, and she just makes herself like a little nest and burrows in with her books, and she'll sit up here and read for hours. So I wanted to make sure that I preserved that for her while still making something nice for myself. The first thing that I had to do was figure out how to update the bookshelves. When we moved in, because the bookshelves were all black, they were in decent condition, not amazing, but it would have cost a couple $100s to replace all of them, even if I was just buying like really inexpensive new shelves. So the first thing that I did when we moved in was I put white contact paper in the backs of the shelves, and while I liked that, it ended up shrinking. Nobody ever told me that contact paper would shrink, so it left these really ugly gaps. So I needed to cover up the gaps. I thought maybe I would just pull the paper off the backing of the shelves, but the backing of the shelves was also paper, and after being up here in the loft, which gets really hot in the summer, for, a couple years, it was not coming off without tearing the backing on the shelves. So I went to the dollar store and I found foam core sheets, and I thought, well, I'll just make backer boards for each of the shelves and I'll paint them the color that I want, and I'll put these backer boards into the backs of the shelves. That'll cover up the contact paper that shrank. That'll give me a color that I want in the back of the shelves. And that was something I was able to do for all of the shelves for like $40 or so, I think, including the materials that I got for paint. I used paint that was left over from our master bedroom, which is this blue color that I put on the wall back here as well. And I just really liked that kind of moody look that it gave the space. Around that time, I also went shopping because I knew I wanted an end table to go between some wingback chairs. And I was able to find a really nice solid wood table that had been repainted black and white at one of the local antique stores. It was like $25 and I was just barely able to fit it into my car. The people working at the antique store were really amused watching me angle this thing into my car. But I got it here, and then I repainted the white drawer to be the same blue that I used on the wall and on the shelves. And I've been really happy with that because it gives me something to set my cup of tea on while I am reading. Another thing I really wanted for the space was my tree. I loved the idea of having a tree with like little white blossoms and LEDs on it. I thought it would make it look really dreamy and kind of bring some fairy tale or fantasy element into the space. I looked at some of those lamps that are like that you can get at various home decorating stores. They were way too expensive and it was going to eat up my entire budget if I tried to do something like that. So instead, I went outside while the neighbors were trimming their trees, and I took one of their very large sticks and I used my Silhouette Cameo to cut out like a cherry blossom shape, and I shaped each one of those by like pressing it into my palm, which kind of rounded the leaves a little bit, and then I hot glued them onto the branch. The stick got glued onto a wooden base that helped it stand upright, but I also tied it to the railing just in case, because when you've got, kids and cats, things tend to fall over. I had some fairy lights left over that had originally been in the curtains in my bedroom, and when we switched to blackout curtains, because our neighbors very kindly installed a floodlight pointed directly in our bedroom windows, I didn't have anywhere to put those fairy lights, so I thought I would put one string of them along the top of the bookshelves wrapped up in some floral garlands that I had from a different room. And the other one I wrapped up on the tree, so it's battery powered. I can pop it out and recharge it whenever I want. Power is a big problem up here because even though the loft is a really big space, there is one outlet and it is behind the shelves so that you can only access one of the two plugs. It makes it really inconvenient to try to have anything up here that needs electricity. When we moved in, the overhead light was broken, so I had to take that down and replace it with one that I got from IKEA. This was another big chunk of the budget because it was like $70. Totally worth it though, because now I can actually see when I'm up here. I had previously had a very short stint where I was trying to stream on Twitch, and I had used this screen over here as like a backdrop to shut out the rest of my living room because my computer desk is in the corner of the living room and I didn't really want people to be able to see all the rest of my life just sitting there behind me. Streaming was not a very good fit for me though, so I ended up repurposing it to hide the doorway into the attic. We very rarely need to go in there, but if we do need to go in, this is hinged so it can go either direction on both hinges. So if we need to get into the attic, you just kind of swing it open like it's another door, and then there's the other door right behind it. I covered the screen with some hanging lights that I also had from the Twitch effort. And then I added some of my book covers that I had printed out on photo paper just to make things, a little more visually interesting. I found a couple decorations on clearance at a couple of different stores, so I spent maybe like $15 getting things like columns to put flower pots on, and of course the flower pots and the flowers. The biggest task for redoing the space was the wingback chairs, which you can see one of them here, and I love these so much. A neighbor had given us wingback chairs from her husband's study after he passed away, and it was just such a generous gift. She knew how much I loved the idea of having wingback chairs. They were a dark red, like a artificial leather, and they had started to crack and peel on the arms, and I always wanted to have blue velvet wingback chairs. I had looked at them online, and the starting price for blue velvet wingback chairs was like $350, which was very far outside of my price range, but I had a staple gun and determination, and I was able to find some blue velvet. So I bought blue velvet for I think like $55, and I reupholstered my chairs myself. It was my first time ever doing reupholstery. The biggest challenge was the tack strip on the front. The chairs originally had individual tacks, which took forever to pull out, and getting the old upholstery off also was horrible, because each chair had, and I counted, they had more than 4,000 staples in each chair. And all of the tacks had come out bent, but fortunately I had brass tack strip put away in a drawer that somebody had given me probably 10 years ago, because I saw it and I was like, you know what, I feel like I'm gonna need that someday. And sometimes I feel bad about my craft supply hoarding, but then something like this happens and I am so justified that I cannot bring myself to clean out these drawers. So they're not perfect because they were my very first try, but on the whole, I really like how they came out. It was an interesting challenge, not something I want to repeat, but I'm really pleased with the end result. And this is how my library space looks in the end. And you can see that most of the books that are in my library space are books that I have written myself. I have to use an extension cord for my screen over there so that I can reach the one and only outlet. I did kind of like a freehand circular shape there just to add some visual interest and kind of break it off from the rest of the living room. We used old decorations that were around the house. I've got my drawer unit where I store stickers and bookmarks. You can see so many of my books here. And these are only sort of sorted out. Up here I've got my proofs, which I am going to be weeding out pretty soon. I set up some interesting little displays of some of my books. These are just the ones that I keep on hand for whenever I sell direct. I need to put away those copies of The Witch and the Worm. Those are the very last hardcovers that I have, and they are damaged. I'm going to be using a new printer soon, and I can't wait to see how that works out. I have my literary awards set up with the series that they belong to. I've got my Nendoroids from Spectrum Legacy, all of my planner stuff. You can see I don't really own a whole lot of books because when we moved here, I had drastically downsized, and I only kept the things that I either had not read or absolutely loved. So if you see anything on there that looks interesting, good luck figuring out which ones are the ones I love versus the ones that I have not read yet. And there's my dreamy tree and my cozy chairs. And yeah, that's pretty much it. And when everything was done, I had actually come in under budget, so I had money left over that I have already spent getting some books to help fill up my bookshelves now that I have lots and lots of empty space. The other end of the loft, those shelves are pretty much empty, so I have lots of room to grow and also a whole lot of room left to store books that I write that I keep in stock for events and signings and people who order them directly from me. I mentioned working with a different printer for my hardcovers for The Witch and the Worm. I had some disappointing quality issues with stuff getting damaged, and I have found probably a quarter of every order that I get from Ingram arrives damaged, and that, along with some of the other weird issues I've had with them, such as getting books that had my cover but somebody else's book entirely on the inside. I worry a lot that other people are going to get orders fulfilled by them that are either broken or in bad condition or have someone else's book inside. So I'm waiting for a quote from another printer, someone who has a lot more features to offer. I'm looking forward to seeing what that might be like. So I'll end up having more hardcovers. I wasn't totally prepared for that. It's a really big investment for me to have hardcovers that I keep on hand, but people have absolutely loved being able to get that book in hardcover, and the hardcovers have greatly outsold the paperbacks, even though the formatting is pretty much the same. So once those arrive, I'll give you all of that information about the printer and the quality difference between Ingram and the new printer that I'm using. Before too long, I'm going to do a follow-up that I promised where I would talk about how the launch month for The Witch and the Worm went. So there's that coming. There's more about character arcs. And of course, next week I'm diving hardcore into writing because once my daughter is back in school, I'll be back on a normal schedule. And I'm going to do my best to get through the rest of the writing for Paragon of Shadow, which is the 5th book in my award-winning Spectrum Legacy series. That's always such a nice thing to be able to say. It's exciting, but it makes me feel a little bit weird. But I guess it's true. Both of my epic fantasy series have won literary awards, and that's pretty crazy. I really love how cozy this space feels, and I'm thinking that once my daughter is back in school, I might come up here to write sometimes too, just to enjoy it. It's especially nice in the evening when I've got all of the fairy lights on and the overhead lights off. It's just a really nice little magical nook. Hopefully the books that I ordered with the leftover money from the decorating budget will be here soon. There's also a possibility that the bookstore I ordered those things from will be carrying my books soon, so I'll keep you posted on that. That's all for now, though. I was just so happy with how this space turned out that I wanted to share it. I'll be back with more writing stuff soon. Take care, and I'll see you next time.